pills. So. Sorry about this, gang. Just a little bit of technical problems. Are you able to see that link? Pills?
Maybe you could text him?
Yeah, I will. I will
Okay.
text him. I will text him, yeah.
It's the goodness of technology, or perhaps the curse. We have many ways of reaching each other. You know, and I wonder if you can only have one, or no, we've had co-hosts before. Every time okay, never mind. I was just thinking maybe like we can't add him as a co-host.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the number of co-hosts, but I've just sent him a. I'm wondering if it's because he's on his computer.
Oh yeah, I think you have to be on. You have to access the app through your phone.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll tell. I don't think he'll be very happy about that.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think you can do it through a computer, through a laptop.
Well, good thing for editing, huh, Elizabeth?
Right. Yeah. No, I'll definitely edit this part out. Or, you know, we might be delving into the comedic aspect that Zizek likes so much.
What just happened? No? Why is he muted? What's going on here? Oh, was he able to do that?
Oh, there we go. It says he's a speaker now. And a co-host. Success.
Pills!
Hello, Pills.
Yo.
Welcome. We're so happy to have you.
So excited.
So,
all right.
So is this? I feel naked, not using a proper microphone.
But you sound perfect, Elizabeth. What do you think?
Yeah, wonderful. Chef's kiss, as the Gen Z says.
All right, so I think we're going to start now. So welcome to Philosophy in the Spotlight. I am one of your co-hosts, Christopher Satur, joined by Elizabeth Schilling. Elizabeth, how are you doing tonight?
Hello, I'm doing wonderful. Glad to be here.
And you have asked me for months upon months to get this person onto this show, partly because of the content that this individual creates. His videos are fantastic. So I am so happy to welcome Plastic Pills on Philosophy in the Spotlight. Pills, thank you for being on our show.
Okay, so I think everyone's here. We can just get started, right? Pills, you still there?
I think he is still here. Pills, you still here? No, I can't hear him.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go.
Well,
yeah.
Now we can hear you.
Now we can.
All right.
Okay, so
this is making me look like a boomer. I'm actually quite good with the technology. I've never done a Twitter space, so.
We believe you.
No, we totally believe you. So I don't know. Were you able to hear my introduction or?
I think I turned the Wi-Fi off on my phone about halfway through it. But
all right, I will do it again as more people are.
Anyway, thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
Yes. So if you don't know, Plastic Pills is a content creator and philosopher, and his videos are broadly directed. I actually have a clip right here I was going to play.
Oh, wow.
Pants in this video because it was ridiculously hot. Don't B-roll this. Originally, pills were a recurring motif in my art. First here, then here.
So I was playing a clip where Pills was talking about how he created plastic pills, which was a recurring theme in his artwork. But I guess my first question to start off everything is, Pills, what do you think the difference is between, let's say, a content creator, an artist, and a philosopher? And where do you see yourself on this level? And what is a philosopher?
Well, I think if speaking to the easy part of that first, I'm a content creator, and only that, because I don't know. It sounds pretentious to call yourself either an artist or a philosopher, but I guess that's the thing that I identify with, the label, and that's what I would do. Sorry, what was the second half of your question, or the first part?
Just that I was wondering if you refer to yourself as a content creator or a philosopher, or is there a difference between content creators who are dabbling with cultural critique and philosophical concepts as opposed to academic philosophers? Is there a difference, do you think, or is there a pro and con to both of these people?
Well, I think absolutely content creation can kind of border what you're calling art. I try to push it there as much as I can when it comes to the visual aspect of it, which is one thing I do. We also have a podcast, as I know you're aware, and maybe some other people are as well. So that ventures more into the more formal side of philosophy, what you'd expect, although it's conversational rather than paper-based. And philosophy happens to be a very paper-based activity most of the time, and that's the part that I don't like. So insofar as philosophy is that, I don't have to write papers anymore, which is quite difficult for me to do because I'm intensely self-critical when it comes to writing. So nothing ever gets done. So I find the content creation loosens up the binds a little bit, and it's a little bit easier to have fun with it.
That's great. So because I think you and Chris know each other a little better than I know you. So if you could just maybe tell us about the history of your YouTube channel. Like, when did you start it and why?
I started it as an experiment because I was so exhausted having written my dissertation. I was like, I don't want to write anymore. I didn't really know anything going into it or what would happen, but it was basically I just liked watching other philosophy type channels, and I haven't I paid for my graduate degree by working freelance graphic design throughout it. So I had some of the software skills required to start that up, and I did it not knowing why. If you ever were to go back and watch some of my first videos, they are very awful, and you can tell that I don't know what I'm doing.
I like the Bachelor one.
Which one?
I liked the first Bachelor series that you were doing.
Yeah, oh yeah, I did it on The Bachelor. Baudrillard on The Bachelor was the very first one I put out. But yeah, learning and kind of growing with my audience, getting their feedback, and then people who want to support it. That came a couple of years into it, but it was basically I was tired of writing and didn't want to write anymore, and then, so I turned to making videos instead.
Okay, that's fair. I have my own issues with academic writing and publishing and the rhetoric that's used. So I'm right there with you. Content creation
Great.
is quite fun.
Yeah, it's great. It feels good, very good when you're finished. I will let anyone who's in that phase, I will let them know.
I was wondering, this is kind of a silly question, but I like it. So what do you think how are you pink pilling or blue pilling your audience in the art that you create?
Oh God, I mean, how am I pink pilling or blue? How am I pilling them?
Exactly.
I think very, very simply, the audience is not. I hope, or I would not think the audience is not intended to be mainly a academic audience. It kind of never was. Of course, starting with a video on the Bachelor series, it wasn't meant to be a academic audience, but more. And I guess this kind of speaks to a question that you asked earlier, with respect to, what would a professional philosopher do? And a professional philosopher is someone who writes for other philosophers. And yeah, my audience, I kind of don't assume prior knowledge. In some cases, that means I try not to oversimplify, but it means at least simplifying, cutting out the jargon, saying what you mean. And the whole purpose of that, I think, is to I believe the world is a very interesting place, and I feel like looking at the surface is not particularly interesting. So it's I guess a process of peeling that layer back just a bit and looking at whatever it is, psychoanalysis or critical theory or Marxism, as a way of making the world as interesting as it is, or rendering it as interesting as it is, rather than in an academic setting.
Okay, that's great. I mean, yeah, I think that it's now like the goal of a lot of us to make philosophy accessible and to try to create community on social media, because that feels more valuable just than maybe a one-sided, like trying to put information out there and brand ourselves for our own self-good. So I like that motive. That's really interesting. So I think you started naming some of the themes of your channel. So how would you articulate the themes that you've covered so far, the philosophers that you've focused on, and do you have any sort of plans for the future? Because I did catch a comment that you said that you might do a live stream on mythology and you wanted to kind of broaden your subject area. So yeah, can you tell us about that?
Well, the videos thus far, their popularity varies quite greatly. I don't usually pay too much attention to trying to get clicks. I guess it's mostly, I call them arcs. When I'm speaking about it, I feel like I have a technology and critique of technology arc, and a psychoanalysis arc, and a more Marxist arc. And these, for me, kind of correspond to what I'm kind of going through offline, I would guess, in some ways. And the current edge of that arc is I really want to open it up to something that's not even necessarily about philosophy per se, but something that is more about interpretations of the world. And yeah, mythology is part of that. And the reason this arc started was because I'm jealous of QAnon, because QAnon seem to be the most creative myth makers alive today, and they're having all the fun. They're hogging it all. So I thought my goal would be to be the next QAnon at this stage. I'm sure in 2 months I'll have something else I'm bugging out about. But that's why the mythology arc is or I'm being propelled that way currently.
I love that. That's a lofty goal. I hope we all support you and wish the best for you in that.
Thanks. Well, I mean, speaking to myth, the intellectual left in particular, I don't think creativity is very lauded over here. Creativity is kind of something that is like extraneous to a lot of what we think our purpose is and our subjects are and our topics are. So I would encourage anybody to try to mix it up a bit.
So I guess I was gonna leave this question to Elizabeth, but since we're rolling, I was gonna add. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on information and social media and the fracture between our real selves and our media self?
Wow. I'm kind of running through my head all the possible answers to that, like real selves. Is that a thing?
I mean, like our self off of social media, I guess.
Or offline and online.
Yes, offline and online. Sorry.
I mean, social media is the easiest thing to rag on, but social media, on the other hand, is like what makes this conversation possible, and the reason that this is the reason that you're talking to me at all is because of different kinds of social media. I wouldn't put any utopian hopes on it, as I don't think that's in vogue anymore anyway. But it's a good way to learn new things. You know, as cheesy as that is, it is. And then there's like, you know, a list of negative things that we could discuss too. But and to the point of AFK selves versus online selves, I mean, that's kind of the reason that I only go by pills, is just for my own sobriety, to remember that this is actually no reflection on an offline self. So that it's I mean, one of the things that a pill represents is a certain artificiality. You know, it's smooth, shiny plastic surface, and I kind of like I embrace that artificiality, because yeah, it is two separate worlds in my mind. It's two separate worlds in the way that information is processed. It's two separate worlds in the way that your information is going to be presented or received. So I embrace the distinction between them, but yeah, I wouldn't call it a real self. I wouldn't call the offline self anything as lofty as real either.
Right, I get that. So you name yourself Pills, and my YouTube channel is just called Philosophy. So I don't know if that's really egoistic, or if it's just bland and neutral, like I meant it to be. So.
Oh, your YouTube channel is just called Philosophy?
It's just called Philosophy, and my profile is like the bust of Plato. So.
Well, yeah, perfect.
I don't know. At least people know.
Liz, I haven't spoken to you before. I'd like to see that after, if you can send me the link.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty boring. Actually, no one should go to my YouTube channel. It's just me.
That's not true. That's not true. Her stuff is fantastic.
Well,
no,
that's great. Yeah, I'll have to see it.
So it's interesting, this this conversation about authentic self. I'm also a bit suspicious of the idea that we have an authentic self, even in the context of branding and having, a certain narrowization of our field of our content that we put out. Because I think that, our positionalities and our perspectives of ourselves change, and we're not completely in control with how people see us and perceive us, even face to face, with the various people that as we navigate our worlds from day to day and we engage in. We have different, I think, levels of self-consciousness and insecurity and confidence and even like self-absorption So I think that, getting to that root pure self, even when we're by ourselves, are we ever not performing and self-conscious of ourselves? But kind of going, I already warned Chris of this. I'm going to shift this conversation and to Byung-Chul Han. And he would say that not only are we actually, if we have an authentic self, not only are we our authentic selves on social media, but there is sort of a tendency to be over transparent and to use social media as a confessional for the public. And he says that we're a bit naive in this, in what we share. He says that, and this is I'm going to quote from The Expulsion of the Other. He says, transparency and hypercommunication deprive us of any protective inwardness. Indeed, we relinquish them voluntarily and expose ourselves to digital webs that penetrate, illuminate, and perforate us. Digital overexposure and nakedness create a latent fear that stems not from the negativity of the other, but rather the excess of positivity. So do you ever feel there's kind of a danger, or is it just a reality of our generation that we feel at such ease to be ourselves and to speak off the cuff, in this space that is somewhat eternal and can be, infinitely replicated and repeated by others?
Do I find it is that?
Yeah.
I mean, I put up very strict barriers personally. I'm not very active throughout the day. I'm active every week, certainly, but not throughout the day for, mental. Keep my mental clean, I would say. But I don't know. I would be speaking for someone else if I said people are too transparent online, and I would wonder who that person is that we're speaking of. I think I know people that are far too online, and whose identity comes from those interactions rather than from interactions that have all the nuances that other human interactions do have. But I'm not going to call anybody out for being too terminally online. I noticed that I'm getting stupider as time goes on. But I guess the offline and the books are always a counterweight to that. Before starting a YouTube channel, I was very, very offline. I think I had a Facebook account that I used once a week, and that was the only form of social media. And I now feel all the pressure, to post on Instagram as often as possible and tweet. And I wouldn't say that I overshare because I hate doing it. So I myself is for me, as opposed to for some other person, I enjoy my opacity.
That's great. Yeah, maybe it's just more personal, and I'm really projecting my own issues, because I find myself being sometimes a little too comfortable online, and I have to rein myself in to not give away too much. Maybe that's just a personality flaw.
I'm certain it's not just you, and Byung-Chul Han obviously has a great points to make there, but I don't think he was speaking about me, because I'm actually quite a paranoiac.
Yeah, I find myself being, well, especially on Twitter. I'm pretty open about myself on Twitter, that I wouldn't normally do on Facebook. Like on Facebook, I'll just post quotes, but on Twitter, I'm pretty open. Like today, I posted a picture of myself when I was a young kid. I was thinking about innocence and wonder, and what it means to be, what would it be like to have innocence again? Which is it's kind of a ridiculous question, but I was thinking about this through. But yeah, no,
Well, I wanted to say one other thing about that is the personality aspect, which is very crafted, and I'm sure all of us craft our personalities towards one or another end, being mysterious or being interesting or being intelligent or being friendly. And I find it funny because once in a while, people are talking about me in whichever like media, like Reddit, and I can see them talking about me as if they know the things or know things about me, when all of these or many of the things are decisions, right? Decisions that I've made because I want to appear in a certain way. Like the Byung-Ho Chon has this quote about positivity or making yourself positive, and not in like a not like you're not a morose person, but positive in the sense that there is no internal lack or internal negation. And I would, if I have any advice to give, it would be to make sure that you have an internal lack and that you're not part of this production thing. But I also find it interesting that people assume that the vesture or investment that you clothe yourselves with, that's enough to go on, really, which is a side effect of celebrity, no matter how no matter how minor of a celebrity it is. Celebrity is a concept, I would say.
Yeah, I think that many or maybe all content creators, or those just who put themselves out publicly, probably share that sort of experience. Yeah, but it's hard because we do that. Yeah, you're right. We do that with musicians and people that are out there. That's all that we see, and so I think we can get into the illusion that that's all that there is, even if we know that that's not possible. I think it's just somehow it's just a human tendency when we're watching someone else.
Mm-hmm. And I think people also want it. They want it, not even in a negative sense, but they want to feel like they know you.
I was just wondering, not to sidetrack us or anything, but I'm glad Elizabeth brought up Byung-Chul Han. Elizabeth really loves Byung-Chul Han's. Oh my God, I messed his name up. Loves his work. So my question to you, I guess, is you had this great canon sort of in your videos. You have Lacan, you have Baudrillard, you have Deleuze, you have how did you pull together this string of thinkers that somehow meld well with the content and the thought of your videos? And do you think there are overlapping themes with all of them, like Deleuze and Lacan and Baudrillard?
I think if there's one thread that unifies them all, it's their post-Heideggerian, and they're all reflecting on Heidegger in some way. They happen to be my canon happens to be largely French, and it's more or less the grad school my grad school comps list. But yeah, I think if you're trying to find a through line, it would probably be just post-Heideggerian. And then there's a post-humanism stuff too. We haven't discussed that at all, because that's one of the few labels I subscribe myself to is post-humanism. So that's another aspect of it, I think. It's this medium. This is not my preferred medium, because I can't tell, like, should I be talking to fill up the empty space, because it's hard for you to see when I'm finished talking, and I can't tell when you're finished talking either. And we're trying to all be polite,
It's a thing that you have to get used to. It's because so I don't want to speak for Elizabeth or anything, but both Elizabeth and I, we love the old Brian McGee videos where Brian McGee sits there, he introduces a thinker, a scholar, and then he invites. And same with Levine. This, I forget her name. Elizabeth, what's her name? Her first name again?
Thelma Z. Levine.
Thelma Z. Levine, who used to do these great live television episodes of philosophy and interviewing concepts. And so we didn't want to do a podcast. We wanted to hold a live discussion. And so it's so funny that that both Elizabeth and I can easily, like, we work well off of each other, like back and forth. We know when, like, it's kind of like a hit and miss, but at the same time, it's a very good flow. But you're right, because you're so used to podcasts and live, live feeds, or I'm not doing well with my words here right now.
No, it's an interesting media discussion, but Chris, that I'm not a phone person anyway. I'm the person who you call and I text you back what. But yeah, I can tell you guys do this because you're better at it than I am. I feel like I like to hide behind my my microphone, and having you in my ear like this, it's invasive,
Well, one of the things I like is that if I'm just using the phone, you can pace and you can walk. You don't just have to sit down. So that's what I like, but maybe it's just, my ADHD talking.
Are you pacing right now, Liz?
I mean, I'm kind of in another room though, because I'm looking at your YouTube channel, and I want to ask you about your latest video, Hyper Commodity Fetishism. I admit I didn't have time to watch all of it, but I just thought the title itself was interesting because one of the things I was reading today was saying that we are becoming a post-materialist world with all of the data and the information that we're consuming. That today we prefer, the argument was today we prefer experiencing and taking in information and reading and seeking information and watching it to possessing anything or having materials. So do you think that is a possibility that I mean, I know we have the physicality and materials of our iPhone or whatever phone we have or our laptop, but we're using it to view for hours on end information.
Yes. So, sorry, I missed the question.
Yeah, no, it was a yes or no question.
Oh, well, I can expand on it a little bit. I mean, I'm sure everybody who's listening to this, you have a probably an academic leaning audience. But the point of doing commodity fetishism was because people just use the word wrong all the time. Actually, I shouldn't even say wrong. They use the Marxist term, but not in Marx's sense. So commodity fetishism, people use it to mean you're horny for technology or horny for iPhones, whereas the Marxist term for it is that it just veils social relations. And I wasn't planning to, but I ended up talking about Baudrillard in this live stream as well, because of exactly what you just said. Actually, Liz, is like his argument is more about the sign relationship and how sign value, we have to consider commodities in terms of their sign value as opposed to their just exchange and use value. So that was where the hyper came in, and I was talking about Travis Scott edition Nike shoes, because Travis Scott is one of my favorite floating signifiers these days. You just put his name onto things, and then it sells them, like McDonald's burgers and Nike shoes. So I don't know much about this being post materialist. I think it's like your phone is made of material, and in a sense, it's more material because of the global network that goes into just producing the things that we just sit on and become addicted to all day. But I wouldn't call it post-material. I'd prefer talking about things in terms of their structure, their sign, or their place in the sign structure. Might be a good way to put it. And that it has a tendency to feel like it's running away from the material, certainly.
Okay, interesting. Thanks. Chris, do you think we should switch it over to the audience? I'm sure they're kind of burning with questions.
Yes, so I forgot to actually say this at the beginning. Normally Elizabeth does our introduction and does it much better than I do. So we have a our show, this live discussion is divided into two parts. So the first part is a 30-minute kind of intense interview, which we've done with Pills. And then the next 30 minutes, we open up the floor to all of you, all of our viewers. And we have a lot, actually. We have about 15 in the space right here, but then another 100 from everywhere that I can't even see. So
where are you streaming this?
Live on Twitter.
Oh, and there's 100 people?
There's a lot, yeah. There's people that we follow, and there's people that you follow, and there's people that Elizabeth follows, and then there's people that don't follow them, and then it's live on their whole medium. So if you do have a question for Pills, just hit the request to ask a question, or if you have a thought, and you can speak directly right to him. And we have our first question. All right, so here is Mr. Third Kind 2. All right, so go ahead. You're a speaker, Mr. Farron.
I don't have to be able to read anything, right?
No, you don't have to read anything. You'll be able to hear them in a second.
Oh,
so
okay.
Please, you're a speaker now. You can ask a question to Pills.
Pills, I have a question. You mentioned that the philosophers you're into are post-Heideggerian. What do you mean by post-Heideggerian, and in what ways are Baudrillard, Deleuze post-Heideggerian?
I mean, I meant post in that they are after. And in a lot of cases, the genealogy they're referring to is trying to contend with his thought. Phenomenology is the most obvious one, but a lot of them, for example, reference Heidegger's identity and difference. So in that sense, Deleuze references it, and I was reading this last week. Lacan and Derrida, obviously, with respect to Heidegger's language argument. So mostly, I meant they came after, but in many cases, they were reading it in grad school and responding to the three H's, trying to kill their fathers, Husserl, Hegel, and Heidegger. And if there is a through line, I guess it would be the three H's that they're all responding to. But Heidegger specifically, because he's the one that I've spent the most time with.
Well, thank you for answering that question. Did you have a follow-up question, Mr. Fahrenheit?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you as well. I was just, it's interesting that you brought up this post-Heideggerian thing, because it's so funny that Heidegger becomes big in Germany in the 20s and 30s, and then after World War II, there's this kind of French Hegel presence, and it's so funny. Before that, it was Heidegger that kind of brought Hegel back into Germany because of post-Kantianism, and he wanted an opposition to this post-Kantian from the Husserl crowd, the phenomenology crowd. So it's interesting that you brought up, Hegel's there is also with Heidegger, and they're flipping back and forth from, Heidegger does that with Hegel, and then Hegel is then flipped into France, and it's interesting.
Yeah, I think you could, equally calling them post-Heidegger, the post-Heidegger crew, you could just call them the post-Kojève crew also, because all of their teachers were at those lectures in Paris.
And you just got back from Paris. I just wanted to say that. I know you don't like a lot of things about your private life, sorry. But were there any things that you were a fan of? Like, did you go visit, where Descartes passed away, or where Foucault was, or Sartre, or Deleuze's apartment, or did you do any kind of any kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for like a pilgrimage in that area.
Well, I stayed right next to the Sorbonne in the Latin Quarter, so that was intentional. But actually, I was looking really hard on Wikipedia and just the internet for all of the sites of the French Revolution, because it's potentially the most important event of modernity. So I was trying to map out mentally, the streets where this thing started, where that thing started. I didn't go to Versailles, unfortunately, but it was more about the French Revolution on this trip than it was where Sartre and Beauvoir had tea, and I went by that place too. One of them, at least, is called De Magot, I think. So I went there and had a glass of wine.
Very cool. Well, we have another question for you, Pills, from Diego R. That's
Diego.
Oh, Diego. So you know Diego.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. All right, so Diego, if you just unmute yourself, you can speak directly to Pills and.
Hey guys, what's up? It was not really any questions. I just wanted to drop by, say hello, and say I'm very glad you guys starting to doing this. I don't know if you've done this before, but I'm a real big fan of the show. I've been a listener to the Peel Pod since the very beginning. I've had the pleasure of being in a couple of episodes, and I plan to be on a few next ones very, very soon. So just wanted to drop by to say hi.
Diego, I'm wearing that shirt you sent me right now. The skull one.
That is
Capital Humano.
That is awesome, and I'm just about to release a new one that is non-comical Marxist cosplay. You're gonna love it.
Hype.
Hi, can I ask another question?
Sure, of course.
Okay, Pill mentioned that he doesn't like to call himself a philosopher, and this brought to mind the trend, starting even before Heidegger, of the end of philosophy. And I'm curious, Pills, if you think philosophy is over, if you think there's a future for it, and why you're against people calling themselves philosophers, or why are you against calling yourself a philosopher?
I'm against. I don't know. It just sounds presumptuous. Same with artist. It's something like someone else calls you rather than you call yourself. And I would never object to someone calling themselves one. Again, I'm a paranoiac, so I'm only speaking in the first person. And Heidegger, I love Heidegger thinks the end of philosophy is the beginning of thinking, and he wants to do this weird thinking stuff because cybernetics has destroyed philosophy or whatever it is. And I'm sympathetic to it. I don't like the version of philosophy that is people writing papers at each other in academic departments. I don't prefer it for me. But, however you get your bag, that's how you get your bag. Though I think often philosophy itself can be a form of, what's a good word for it? Like ressentiment, even, in a Nietzschean sense, where you kind of get to build this little dollhouse of your own little puzzles about the world, and it becomes very hyper-specific. And of course, I'm not singling anyone out as doing this as a philosopher. I have the same tendency to, sort out the problems in the dollhouse because it's easier than inventing something. But the other side of philosophy, and the part that I find makes it interesting, is readapting problems and being creative, or readapting to problems and being creative. And in that sense, you have just a very rich 2,000-3,000 year tradition of people everywhere in the world that we call it philosophy. And so I don't think it's over, but I think its purpose has to be set out by the people who call themselves philosophers before I decide whether I want to, join up. I kind of like theory better. I like that as a catch-all phrase.
Okay, so do you see any hope for philosophy in academia, or do you think, like it was before, there will be a lot more philosophers outside of academia, even on YouTube, for example, as you do?
Could you repeat the end of that one more time?
Well, I said, do you see any hope for philosophy inside academia, or do you see it continuing outside of academia as it has, like before Kant's, especially, like Locke, Descartes, they weren't classical academics in the sense of today. Do you see any hope for philosophy in academia, and or do you see it continuing in like YouTube, for example, as you're doing?
It's just a strange question. Do you see any hope for it? And this is the benefit and curse of academic departments is that they are not subject to market logic because they're publicly funded and will probably continue to be publicly funded. But I prefer, this is a little bit, it's going to sound a little cringe, but I prefer the independent, external to the academy, because it feels a little more anti-authoritarian, which is a streak that I have in my life. And you can, and you interact with like just normal people. It's like you can't learn anything about psychoanalysis unless you're actually analyzing someone. I think this is one of the speakers brought this up. I'm stealing it from him in this Zizek conference that happened this week. But it was kind of a critique saying, you guys all have these theories and psychoanalytic theories, and you're trying to solve these puzzles and apply it to movies and apply it to social media, but you can never update your theory unless you go to psychoanalyze somebody. So I really love the fact that I interact with people from every country and people who can, not necessarily the sorts of people that want to spend 4 years studying philosophy or can't afford to, or whatever the case may be, but they find it in their own way. So I wouldn't say that there's no hope for academic philosophy, but I'm not particularly interested in the structure that goes with that.
Well, we have a lot more questions for Pills. I'm going to go to Eduardo. He is now a speaker. He has a question, so you can unmute yourself and ask Pills a question. Or Eduardo Ballast. Oh, nope, he's gone. He's been disconnected.
While we're waiting for our next question, I would say that, I think it's really interesting thinking about this extension from, formalized academia to the internet in a more kind of accessible format, meeting various people not in the academy, is that I think the pandemic really made that switch kind of possible, because when I first got into my independent study of philosophy, I did it through, meetup groups, because now the meetup groups, I think there was one in Seattle or one in Toronto, and they were remote and they were online. And I wonder if, it really was the pandemic and just everyone kind of putting everything remote for 2 years that made it possible for not a separation, but between academia and social media and the social arena on the internet, but now there's a connection, so there doesn't really have to be the end of academia. I think it's highly connected.
Yeah, it's true. And also, the one thing you lose from going online and not requiring degrees and all that stuff is that anyone can say anything. So there may not be a check, those checks in place, and that's kind of the trade-off, I think. But I like that there's fewer barriers to entry, and I am, like you said, I kind of encourage academics to make sure they are public facing, and that not your friends aren't only, your philosophy department. So I really think it's more important than it seems, maybe.
We have another question for you. Unfortunately, I don't know how to say this person's name, so it's HAHSBD. Hasd. If you would like to Oh, hey, okay. We can hear you.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. So I guess I'll just go off the question that we've been working with. As I'm sure both Pills and Chris know, I'm a huge fan of like post-structuralism. And if you look, for instance, like the way they were doing lectures during like the Vincennes stuff.
Sorry to interrupt you. I know you, right?
Yeah, you know me, buddy.
Okay. I thought it was your voice.
It's been a minute though. What I'm interested in is how like these digital territories and these online spaces create, and in a sense, they sort of fulfill some of the goals that you see laid out in like Anti-Oedipus. Do you guys feel like there's a way that we could all collectively work further towards these more collective forms of enunciation and sort of ways of studying and working? I mean, obviously, we're all like across countries right now. I'm standing outside a grocery store about to buy some ginger ale from Mixer, for instance. Yeah, like, do you guys see that as, I don't know, do you feel like that is something that like you're actively working towards, like the creation of these new territories for not just philosophy, but theory in general?
Chris, you want to answer that first?
How about Elizabeth? Why don't you? Do you have anything to say, and then I'll jump in, and then Pills can jump in. I'm not sure Elizabeth is well. Not well. Sorry, I don't know if she's read Deleuze, but she could maybe jump in if she has something to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be, if I'm kind of following the question, you can jump in and let me know if I'm not. But, you know, what I do know about Deleuze is that, you know, he's introducing kind of this new spatial orientation where, you know, it's kind of like a hyperlink. You can create something, whatever the center is or the origin is, and then it kind of shoots out and grows in different directions. And yes, on one hand, you know, like Pills was saying, there's not really a vetting process to that. You can have whatever information you want out there, but when you do kind of get into an area where you have people kind of working off each other, and that creativity can really blossom organically, and no one knows really where it can go. You know, for instance, we were mentioning the Zizek conference. You know, most of the time conferences are at various places, and you have to buy, you know, a $300 or more ticket to go there, and, you know, have your hotel room, and you're just meeting this, you know, very like a very narrow kind of community. But, you know, having conferences online and being advertised on Twitter, which is where I saw the Zizek conference, you know, that was such a great experience for me, because I haven't been to a conference in a long time, just because, you know, it is really expensive. And so, you know, I got to see different people. And I know, Pills, you've mentioned that, you know, the whole like reading on your channel, like the whole reading a paper, it's hard to digest. And I definitely agree that it is, but some of the presenters and speakers were, I think, a little more accessible and clear than others, and you could understand them without even reading, you know, what they had read and what they were referring to. Like Chiara Kremen, I really loved, and Mari Rudy, I really loved. You know, and so now I've just bought Chiara Kremen's book, you know, and I'm excited to read it and talk about it on my YouTube channel. And, you know, it's just your world kind of opens up in these collective spaces. And so I really think that it leans toward, you know, looking at social media and these collective virtual spaces as really productive and creative.
Have we lost Pills? I can't see him on here.
Yeah, he's gone. I think he disconnected.
Oh no, maybe he turned his Wi-Fi off again. I'm sure he'll come back on.
I'm sure he will come back on. I think, Diego, do you have a question for Pills, or do you want me to? Yeah. Okay. So I'll wait till he gets back on.
But I think you can carry on, Chris. I mean, we can keep the conversation. I think most of the people that just spoke, they can add to the conversation. And there's Bill. He's back.
Yay! Great.
I can't. Okay, so I will just I will invite.
He's back now. Pills is back.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna invite him back just as a co-host. So just while he's getting back in, just to be like the devil's advocate here, because Anti-Oedipus is about reconfiguring the triad, right? The triad of mummy, daddy, and child. And so I think when it comes to social media spaces, we also have to make sure that this is to Ian's point, that we don't make these spaces places of capture. So we don't make there's a massive right-wing following on Twitter right now, and they have like insane spaces, where they're discussing Strauss and and civil war with Democrats and stuff like that, and completely what Deleuze says in regards to the war machine. And so this is a place of capture, a place of this would be a reterritorialization as opposed to a deterritorialization. And this is the space and that's the kind of space that we don't want. We don't want a structural arborescent ground where people are decoding and using rhetoric and propaganda and places to capture frustration and alienation. We want to kind of make it organic, a molecular, to use all these Deleuzian terms. If that makes any sense, Ian, did I hit the right points or?
Yeah. Can I offer just like a quick thought on that? I would say that like what we're doing right now is a rarity. And if you look at like other theorists, like I'm not going to drop a bunch of jargon, but Stiegler, for instance, he was really interested in like these more positive and creative uses of technology. And for instance, if you look at something like Instagram, there's like an inherent focus on like this impossible to achieve body image that's like consistently pounded through your skull throughout the entire thing. So there's a lot of ways in which like social media and digital spaces are making things kind of difficult to organize the way that we're organized right now. But I think the fact that like this is like a cross-continental conversation right now demonstrates that there is absolutely a possibility for things like this to continue and carry on.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in defense of Instagram, if you can connect with people that inspire you, it can really elevate your sort of whatever path you're on, if it's an intellectual path or whatever. So, for instance, I have a quote unquote bookstagram, and then I follow other people who are kind of reading things that I would like to read, and I mean, maybe it kind of encapsulates the influencer for better or worse, but they definitely influenced me to pick up these new books that I wouldn't have otherwise, thought about or discovered as soon. And I think there can be a conversation on Instagram as well below the picture, so it doesn't have to always be, a well curated picture. Although I try to, create good, lighting on my books that I take pictures of. But I don't know. I think that it's not really. I think it's not really what it is, but I think it's how you approach anything. I think anything can be positive and productive if you have the right relationship to it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's not as if, I mean, the Instagram thing was obviously like a bit of a cheap shot on my part, but yeah, it's definitely a question not of whether or not a given thing is good or bad, but of mediating the relationship between like the toxic and curative aspects of it.
So I'm not trying to hold the conversation. I'm trying to get Pills back. If you can hear me, I'm sending out requests for you to speak and for you to be a co-host again, because I've got several people requesting to ask you questions. So hopefully you're hearing me, Pills, and that you're able to. But I guess we'll keep the conversation going until you can get back. So I'm going to probably go back to either Diego or Fahrenheit, Mr. Fahrenheit, and maybe we can keep the conversation going until I can get Pills back as a speaker. So I really appreciate all of your help.
Sure. So my point I wanted to raise, and maybe we can get more opinions than Peels on this, even though Peels will be awesome. So we're organizing an event on the 22nd of September in Mexico, gathering some philosophers from the Spanish-speaking world, some from Argentina, Chile, Spain, Mexico. And one of the events, one of the side events we're doing is we're doing a funerary service for philosophy. And this will be the fourth edition of a funerary service for philosophy. The first three were conducted by Ernesto Castro, he's a Spanish philosopher from Madrid. And this one is going to be done in the grave of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, which is a very famous Mexican poet. She wrote sonnets. And I wanted to present this idea of the funerary service of philosophy together with the historical analysis of the meaning of philosophy as a category that has retrospective value. Because it became evident to me last week. I was introducing the presentation of a book from a friend of mine called Ethics for the Suspicious. And I'm not a philosopher by formation. I'm a designer, and I have a postgrad in critical theory. And I introduced myself as a designer with this postgrad in critical theory, and I said, I'm not a philosopher. And he, a guy with a PhD in ethics, he interrupted me, and he said, well, Plato was not a philosopher, and Aristotle was not a philosopher. So you have to think that the world philosophy is mostly applied post-mortem or retrospectively after the work is done. So I think if we apply a little bit of deconstruction theory to the word philosophy itself, it has also become a master signifier. And it's a floating signifier, and even more complicated given the fact that it becomes part of the academic apparatus, it becomes part of careers, professions, money-making intention. It's trapped by the system of desire of capitalism. So maybe we have to even challenge the notion of philosophy becoming a profession, becoming a source of money-making, and retroactively rethink about this master signifier and what it implies today.
I love that. I used to have a writing instructor, a writing professor that said, you can call yourself a writer if you write. So, even if you're at a beginning place in philosophy and you're just kind of consuming and taking in all this knowledge and reading all these books, I mean, all of us, in a sense, if philosophy is trying to critically reflect on our world and ourselves and our relationships, then we are doing philosophy. We don't have to be validated by the public or academia or our published writings. So I really appreciate that, Diego.
Yeah, I think I agree with Diego on this as well too. Like even the term philosophie, like love of wisdom. What are philosophers but lovers of wisdom? And this has nothing to do with the great, Latin tradition. And by Latin I mean Roman Latin tradition of the scholastics and the trivium and the quadrivium and.
Chris, sorry to interrupt, if I may. Not lovers, friends, because there's
friends.
A difference.
Yes.
There's a big difference between agape, eros, and philia.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry. You're right. Friends of wisdom. Sorry, my bad. You're right.
That is so interesting because, Chris, that's how it is in even my intro to philosophy textbook. It says lover of wisdom. I don't know. I just realized that too because I usually say that.
Yeah, we're not lovers of philosophy. We're friends.
Yeah, so even the idea of friends, which goes back to the polis, right? This idea of like a community of people, speaking in the agora, has been completely misrepresented, right? In the kind of academic university, which is, you pay to get an education and hear someone, teach their book or something, which is something I can't stand when professors do that. But Mr. Fahrenheit would like to jump in. And Diego, by the way, it's really nice meeting you. And thank you for please stay, and I'm loving your comments.
Yeah, man, me too. I've heard you before in the Peels podcast, and I would love to have you in my podcast, man.
Oh, that would be great. So, Mr. Fahrenheit, please jump in. I hope I'm saying your name right.
You got it. This is a question I actually had for Peels. He spends a lot of time on postmodern philosophers, at least post Descartes, as he said. Sorry, post Heidegger, as he said. But I'm wondering if he thinks, or if any of you guys think, that there should be more space left for the ancients, particularly Plato and Aristotle and the pre-Socratics, because if, as you guys have said, we need to inquire into what philosophy is fundamentally. Perhaps we need to return to the beginning in a meaningful sense, because perhaps we've erred in a way that that has put philosophy in the precarious position it's in today. So I would love if Pills made more videos or more discussions on Plato and Aristotle, and so to understand their place and maybe find new things that we previously didn't consider.
I mean, I'll just say, I mean, I know Pills pretty well, and I don't want to speak for him, and I wish he could. Pills is, I don't think it's that he doesn't dislike the classics. I think he's someone that's critiquing the culture of information and information societies, and so people like Foucault and Deleuze and these post-Heideggerian thinkers that he's saying are the best avenues to engage in, I guess, post-truth, like our new world of information, where information's everywhere and nowhere. So, and there's this kind of oversaturation of knowledge. I mean, people have Wikipedia at the hands of at the fingertips. They could get access to anything. So I don't know. I'm trying to get Pills on there. Elizabeth, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the great thing about YouTube or any social media forum is that you can always find a channel that has the content that you want. I agree that it would be great if Pills did, any kind of subject, because, he has a great personality and it's just a great way of like getting people to talk. I guess one way we might convince him to talk about Plato is if he is interested in mythologies. There are mythologies in Plato's, dramatic literary works like Timaeus, and so I think there's an argument to be made.
Right. I asked specifically because Chris mentioned that in the current post-truth world we're in, these other philosophers like Baudrillard become more relevant. So I may have misunderstood what he said, but are you kind of saying that Plato and Aristotle are obsolete for our times? Because
No. For me, my interest is in German idealism, 18th and 19th century philosophy, and I think actually returning to people like Schelling and Kant and Fichte and Hegel are really important to me, because I think we're having these relevant discussions about what is spirit, what is subject, what is difference, right? The whole idea of difference right now is extremely important, especially in a world right now where we're having problems with race and with sex and with understanding things like transgender and all that stuff. And I'm not saying I don't understand that. I'm just saying some people on the right are not being so gracious. So the whole point about difference is a big thing right now, and about and a kind of Badiou, and the words of Badiou, to make those that don't appear in a society appear in a kind of new politics. Not that Plato doesn't have that. Like look at Badiou. Badiou is a great example of someone that's a thinker that thinks through a kind of a material Plato. So there are people that are rethinking stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know how Pills would answer that. I just know that his kind of canon is this Deleuze, Baudrillard, Stiegler, Luhmann canon that's working to break down the system of information. Diego, please jump in.
Sure, and we partially had this conversation in the last time I was in the podcast. But one thing that I would like to comment on is that you were saying that the right is gaining so much media space and media attention, and it's absolutely true. And when I say the right, I think because I'm from Latin America, we have a different notion from the right, and I'm a Marxist-Leninist tradition. The idea of having liberals on the left is weird to me. Having any type of idealism on the left is weird to me, to be honest. And one of the things that we have seen a lot in media spaces and social media in Latin America is that authors like Foucault and a lot of the postmoderns are being used by the right, by the liberal right, in the sense that they're using this notion of every position of power has a micro power. And I think that the critique that Baudrillard did to Foucault, saying that Foucault was amazing, mapping out capitalism as this flow of power, but then not really being any type of subvertive critique of capitalism. just like a perfect description of the system, but not a critique. So my word of awareness, and what I really like about what you just said, Chris, is that maybe we need a more materialistic reading of the classics, and abandon the idealism that was used to give rise to the, let's say, to the promise of modernism and all the mistakes of modernism that we are still hanging to today, like this notion of human rights, the metaphysics of the individuals, and a lot of the things that are still like the key winning factors from the right in the world. And when I mean right, I still mean liberals.
I think that was wonderfully said. So
any luck with getting Pills back on?
I'm having a little problem, and he's a little frustrated. He says it's reading that he's a co-host, but he can't hear anything, and he's not allowed to speak. So I'm asking him to leave and to come back, because he's actually Elizabeth, could you try clicking on his name and hitting co-host and see if it works for you? Because I think oh, maybe he left and he's coming back. Oh, nope, he's a speaker now. Perfect.
Okay, great.
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Jesus. Fucking Twitter.
So we've had a lot of questions. So like Mr. Fahrenheit and Diego has been, we've all been speaking for you. So the question was referring to the classics. Would you ever do a video on Plato? Would you return to the classics? Is there any desire to go back to any of the classics?
I did a video on Plato, but it was to say that Plato was stupid.
Oh, good God.
Well, right. Basically, I'm saying, Pills. Do you think that, like, Plato and Aristotle are obsolete today? Because you spend a lot of time on the postmodernists. I'm curious what you think about them and re-understanding them to understand our times.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any trouble calling them obsolete. I know that's like a bad thing to say to a group of philosophers, but I'm mad at my phone right now, so yeah, I'll just say that they're obsolete.
Wow. Interesting take, I think. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, what, you want to, like, solve the problems of our world by wondering if the analogy of the cave is still helpful, or what? Like, what do you asked the question that they're obsolete, so I'd kind of flip it around and say, make the case for why I should keep reading Plato.
Well, I imagine because of philosophy is in a precarious position today. I think going back to the beginnings and seeing how it was understood before and why philosophy was so great, as done by the Platos and Aristotles, perhaps it can shine a light on how we can go forward today.
Well, our boy Heidegger didn't think they were so great. He said they ruined philosophy.
I don't know. I'm not sure I agree with Heidegger on that, but we'll agree to disagree.
But I mean, like, there are thinkers that I like. Look at Foucault, for example. Foucault writes even his text on sexuality. He writes a fantastic book on there's a lot of portion of that text that he's working through the Greeks. As I said before, Alan Badiou, has worked through Plato and has rewritten the Republic in a really interesting way. And I encourage you to read it. I mean, I'm not the big huge supporter of Badiou, but of course I'm a Schillingian. But anyways, there are thinkers, I think, that are doing this project. But I think also, Pills, I think Diego had a question for you.
Well, it was not a question, Pills, but I think it's something we have spoken before in the past. That my take on this notion of the classics was that maybe what people need to be careful is that we need maybe a more material reading of some classics, and to give away or stop reusing or rehashing the same idealistic notions that are now being instrumentalized by the right and even the liberal right, which I love to remind people that liberals are on the center and on the right. There are no left liberals, to be honest. But most of them, they can be very smart in instrumentalizing any type of idealism. So if there's anything to be rescued from the classics, for me, is the material side of classics, or a material reading of some classics. I don't know what you think.
Well, I think rereading things materially is the only potential use, I would say, because no one's like, I mean, even the issue of time, right? If you're trying to understand time through Aristotle's logic, then I don't think that's relevant. So whenever anyone says to me, like, give me, or do you think they're relevant? The hot take is no, they're not. But I also am like, are you lumping all the books together? Which books should we be rereading? Are any of them as important as like Marx? Probably not. Are they fun? Sure, they're fun. They're fun in the same way that reading mythology or religious texts is fun. But I wonder what the speaker's. Sorry, I can't remember your name, but I wonder what relevance means, and I wonder what like you expected my answer to be, or which books you're talking about, or like I don't know that that's an argument that's best had.
Can I just add something to what you said, which I loved? Actually, kind of quoting Marx on this, but Marx said that he didn't love reading. He hated, he despised reading. He was devouring books in order to digest them and then shed the thing that will make the earth fertile for the future to prosper. So I think a lot of people confuse like this love for philosophy or this love for knowledge in an erotic manner, but also in a consumist manner. Like saying that you have to devour all this knowledge as bragging rights. And I think some people treat the classics like an ad honorem, like because they were great, we have to read them, you know? And I like this idea that reading is a hustle, it's a pain in the ass. It has to hurt. It's almost something that goes against what you think, and it has to be materially digested in order to provide fertilizer for the future. And Marx was a nasty bastard like that.
Yeah, turn Plato and Aristotle into fertilizer. Is that what you just said?
Yep, exactly. I didn't say it. Marx did.
Okay.
Could I offer like an alternative thought on the whole classics thing real quick?
Absolutely.
So I recently had like a large argument with a Straussian about the classics, and one thing that I want to point out.
Oh my god.
Yeah, you remember.
Yeah, that's never a good idea.
I won, which is the important part. But anyway, here in the 21st century, even just looking at like advances in thought in the 20th century, like cybernetics and systems theory, for instance, we're in a position where there's a huge amount of violence being done to older ways of thought. And you see a lot of the ways that people are trying to rebaptize archaic thought. Now, obviously, I'm not saying a return to the classics is necessarily that, but engaging with some of the newer works, even some of the stuff that Chris is into, like Schelling, for instance, which compared to, the ancients is quite new, there is like an absolute violence of thought that inheres within them. And that rips away like a lot of the preconceived notions that are just sort of sitting in the background of like a lot of the classical things. Like, for instance, I probably read like 8 or 9 Platonic dialogues at this point, and Socrates is just a fucking cop. Like in Theaetetus, he calls himself the midwife of knowledge. He's just appointing himself judge, jury, and executioner of other people's ideas. Like there's a certain, we're in a certain position where things are very different, and I would recommend engaging with things that are closer to the present just to really take advantage of what it is that they offer and their novelty.
Elizabeth, do you want to say anything about that, or before?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about it, but I'll try to minimize my thoughts. But isn't it, and I may be biased, just full disclosure, I am a professor at a college, so, I definitely teach the classics and go take a historical, chronological approach. So that may give me a bit of a bias, but don't you think it's important to read the works that the newer philosophers, the more contemporary philosophers, have also read and are inevitably, even if they don't refer to them explicitly, are responding to them in some way? I mean, was it Whitehead that said that everything is footnotes to Plato? I mean, it's going to be easier. You're going to have an easier time and be able to read those contemporary newer philosophers in a deeper, more meaningful way if you understand who they've read and the background and the history that we've come from, you know. So I think that absolutely, if you want to engage with any part of philosophy, I think that, you know, having some sort of experience in the classics and the ancient ideas and thoughts is important to really understand the newer work holistically.
Guys, I just want to, sorry.
I'm sorry, I would just go one step further and point out that a significant amount of new thought isn't just involved with philosophy. Like, there's an entirety of, just like Whitehead, for instance, used to go to parties looking for Einstein to debate him on his metaphysics. Like, there's an entirety of not just engagement with philosophy that philosophers make, but also of the arts around them, the sciences around them. And if we decide that we have to read things in chronological order just to understand one philosopher, we're going to drown ourselves in an entire library of thought.
Well, I don't necessarily mean read everything. I mean, who can really do that? But to just have some awareness of different points of reference, I think can help and enlighten our newer reading.
I think just to jump in for a second, as someone that, you know, I mean, right now I consider myself more of a historian than a philosopher because I'm doing 18th and 19th century thought. But at the same time, Schelling says something like, in order to create a philosophy of nature, one must think nature or think through nature. So, like, I think, like, as a Schellingian, I'm a philosopher of freedom. So I'm rethinking the concept of freedom materialistically, in the material way, as Diego was saying, and also thinking about nature. That we're going through a crisis with we're going through a climate crisis, and also something that I said on Pills's live feed. On his live feed, I was talking about moving away from dialectical philosophies, like moving with Schelling and Whitehead. I like Whitehead. I think we need to move more towards pluralistic philosophies. Look for pluralism. Look for pure difference. Look for not substance-based ontologies, but relational ontologies. Look for things that can help engage our politics, can make things, can make us recognize the other and discuss the other, as opposed to. But I also do as a PhD candidate think that there is a space for the classics. I mean, I don't think we could. I don't think, you know, I'm not trying to be ivory tower here, or, you know, but I really do think people should read, you know, Plato, should read the classics, but they should also be working with the same philosophy of our contemporary time too. One can't just be sitting in a room rethinking the concepts of 17th century or 16th century. You can rethink those concepts with modern concepts, which I think is something that Deleuze does. Like, look at Gilles Deleuze. Like, Deleuze rethinks the 16th century monk Duns Scotus to rethink the concept of pure difference through univocity, and thinks of also through Occam, through Hume, through Kafka, like all of these thinkers. He has this great marginal canon. But let Pills answer, and then we'll go back to Fahrenheit and Diego again.
What would you like me to answer?
Well, they were. I guess. Oh boy, I don't even know the question. I think it was about this. I think Ian had brought up this point about, like, almost like having a scission, a cut, and that we should only be really reading the relevant kind of, I guess, post-structuralism material because it's dealing with the here and the now.
Well, you can read what you want to. I want to make sure that I'm not trying to say don't read what you don't want to read, but you absolutely can make a case for sort of skipping out on things you don't want to read. That would be a bit of an easier way to put it. Obviously, like, for instance, like, I work in science in real life, so Plato's not going to be something that I can make use of in my day-to-day existence, but obviously there's a variety of viewpoints here, and there's no reason to think that any one of us is, like, the correct one, as much as we're just representing different ways of approaching how to engage with philosophy.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful.
So just before we jump to Fahrenheit and then Diego, Pills, how are you doing for time? Because I don't want to take all your time. We did have some technical issues with you for about 10 minutes. Can you stay for another 10 minutes, or do you have to go? Or
No, I don't got anything going on. And I since I fucked up so much of this stream, I'll make sure. It'll have to end when my phone battery dies, though.
Okay, so do you have about 15 minutes that we can
yeah, for sure, man.
Get the next two speakers, and then yeah. Okay, so Mr. Fahrenheit, and then we'll go to Diego again.
Something that I'd like to mention, especially regarding Pills and Diego, is that at least for me, they focus too much on action. I mean, Pills says often ideas don't matter, and Diego was mentioned earlier about reading, basically for what you can do with it. But at least in my life, and Aristotle said in the Metaphysics that philosophy first began in those places where men had leisure, and leisure is important, at least for philosophy, at least I think, and ideas should not just be pursued for action, but for their own sake. And I'm curious what Pills and Diego think about this.
Well, I guess it's ultimately just going to depend on what you think philosophy is for, and if it's a self-improvement exercise and you enjoy reading books, and then go for it.
Well, my side, man, I'm giving up. I'm giving up in the sense that I'm becoming not only a materialist, but almost a physicalist, like a monist physicalist, going back to Spinoza all the way. In the sense that I was even joking with Pills last time we were talking that I think metaphysics is just symptomatic of material conditions. That's it. I'm becoming more and more convinced by this, and it's weird because my wife is a Lacanian psychoanalyst. My brother is specialized in artificial intelligence ethics. So I've been surrounded by metaphysics for a very long time, and it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around any notion that even moving from this notion of dialectics, the dialectical relationship between ideas and matter, and how ideas change the world, or if the world is just the one driving the chariots of time, and ideas are just our way of giving sense to what is happening to us. That happens completely a posteriori. So I'm giving up. Like I'm becoming a monist. I was joking about this with Pills the other time. But I wish I could stay longer with you guys. But now I'm gonna read one of the classics, The Little Prince, to my two kids and put them to bed. And I'm gonna do my daddy job, which is much more important in practice than most of the metaphysics we can speak about in here. But beyond any jokes, it was really a pleasure to speak with you guys and get to know you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Mr. Fahrenheit kind of snuck it in there, like philosophy only begins when man has leisure, and the reason that you have leisure is because someone else is growing your food for you. Right?
Well, yeah, I was actually going to say perhaps I'm bourgeois for this, but yeah, go on. I mean, it's true. You make a good point, but I don't know. It feels kind of anti-philosophy that this focus on action. But continue. Sorry for interrupting.
I think it might be anti-philosophy, and maybe I am anti-philosophy. I'm pro-content, though.
I think I was reading something by Dale Snow today, and she's talking about the critique of German idealism in regards to all of the thinkers, and she says it's only really Schelling that has appreciation for what a woman is and what femininity is, and Hegel and Kant and even Schopenhauer have these terrible views, and so like how can we have a categorical imperative when the other is left out? How can we have an understanding of the universal I or any of these concepts which were supposed to be universalized? And so her whole the whole point about this comment was these philosophies that were meant to be revolutionary and at the same time meant to hit both the ideal and the real were supposed to be interactions with reality, and if they're not circumventing that reality, then we have to rethink them, or we have to think through some of the problems that we have today, and how we can answer those problems. I'm just running off a tangent here. But Elizabeth, do you have anything to say to Pills or?
No, I mean, I would, just comment on what you said. I guess when I come across those sticky passages about women and various philosophers, I shelve them for my later feminist rants that I'm gonna publish. But no, I'm just kidding. I try to ignore them. No, I mean, I just thank you, Pills, for coming on and spending time with us and sharing a little backstory about your YouTube channel and everything. Is there anything else that you want to say, or any last questions from the audience?
Nothing that I want to say, but I would, if anyone wants to still ask questions, I would be happy to hear that.
I have a question. What did you write for your PhD?
I wrote on... I actually would prefer not to get into it.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I never want to talk about my dissertation either, so I get you.
My dissertation was way too lib, ultimately. So
I guess I have a question, not about your dissertation. We've discussed, like, not on this show, that you want to take your content in a different direction, a little more cultural critique and less philosophy. How would you do these videos now? Like, would you think through a concept, or would it be straight critique, or how do you see the future of your plastic pills? Of your content. Sorry.
Well, I don't think there's going to be any noticeable shift to anybody, except that I said that already, But what I hate feeling the burden of is explain. If you get me on that point. Like, I hate standing. It's cringe to, like, wave my hands around and try to be an explainer of this idea or that idea. It's far more interesting to me to, create the sense more in the sense, I mean, phenomenologically, like when you're standing in front of a piece of art or whatever, you get a sense of the world that it belongs to. And I'm more interested in that aspect of content creation, not the explaining, which is like talking down, acting like I'm an authority on it, instead of showing a viewer that there's, like, this thing belongs to an imaginary world that has all of its own connections. And I find that I think if I were to die, I would be much more happy having done that than explain people's homework for them, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah.
I would prefer to be a sense maker than someone who stands and explains things. That's the short answer of that.
Well, we have, believe it or not, one more question by 23, just myself. They're a speaker now, so you can unmute yourself, and if you have a thought or a question, you can ask Plastic Pills. Um, 23, just myself. You're still muted. Oh, nope, they're off. Well, I think this is probably a good place to maybe stop. What do you think, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, we can always do this again another week. So, Pills, you are welcome anytime.
Oh, thank you very much. I will make sure that if there is a next time that I figure out Twitter Spaces a little bit better.
No. We were super happy to have you, and thank you for staying on a little later and for answering everyone's questions and being your very glib and witty self. So it was great to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you to all those who asked questions. We will, I think, if Chris, is this right? We're going to be back here next weekend as well. We're going to try to do one of these a week.
Yep. Every
That's
Saturday.
I would be interested if you're looking for topics. I'd be interested in a topic that's what is philosophy for? Because we kind of got into that, and I think the different speakers had different ideas about what it's for, and yeah, I would like to hear from you guys what you think philosophy is for, because you've been more moderating the discussion than explaining that aspect, and I'd like to hear. Chris, I know most of what you think, but I'd like to hear Liz answer that too.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you should go ahead, jump, unless you don't want to, but I would also like to hear as well too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I would love to share. I think that's a great question, and I'm sure that we could talk for an hour and a half about that as well. Everyone would be interested. The thing that I really appreciate about philosophy is that it's the realm of unanswered questions. So, throughout history, there have been various subject areas and fields of just different disciplines that have, they've actually been a part of philosophy until they have, they've gathered more answers and created their answers with some, level of certainty, and then they go off on their own, right? So now physics is not just the philosophy of physics or a part of philosophy, but it's its own field and so on. And so, Bertrand Russell said that when you start to gather certainty, then, it no longer belongs to philosophy. And I think some of the most important questions that sort of haunt our human predicament are those that philosophy engages with. And even if there aren't clear answers all the time, we can't stop asking them as the curious species that we are. And so I think it's the place where you can have discussion, and there's not an expectation that the discussion will end. It's important to just keep generating questions.
That's good. I like that.
I do as well too. The quest is in the question.
There you go.
One thing that I like about philosophy, like I work in psychology, like in a university lab right now. One of the things I find fascinating about philosophy is how much it enriches other fields, and how much, even if you're not directly engaging with a philosopher on the spot, you can see the manner in which it changes how you engage just with thought itself. It's a very it adds dimensions to what it is that you're doing, even if it's not necessarily philosophical. And I'm very grateful for the way in which it works like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's on point for sure. That's the way that philosophy relates to other disciplines and subjects. Wonderfully said.
What would you say because I think my view would be a little bit different from what you articulated, Liz, in that the previous, not Ian, but the previous Mr. Fahrenheit, I think, he said that I'm too concerned with what philosophy can do, and I think that's true. I am concerned with what it does because I see it as articulating problems rather than curiosities for their own sake. And then if there are answers, or if there are follow-ups in kind of what Ian just said, in terms of a disciplinarity that follows, or cross-disciplinarity that follows, it is about problems, not just not curiosities. So I think that also lends itself to, in my view, a demand or an unction that something must follow. So something must be done with it, which is kind of the reason that I don't crack open Aristotle very often.
I think he also said that it felt like that a lot of the content was directed towards action.
Yeah, what else is there?
Cool.
Ideas floating on the plane of thought, or do you want to do something with them? Yeah.
But it's so
thinking in itself, just ponder it. I mean, I guess we're different in that way, so I can respect it, Bills.
Thank you. I respect you as well, but I don't agree.
I mean, I love metaphysics. I even consider myself a metaphysician, so I'm not a materialist. I would never even say that. Maybe like an idealist realist. That there's a balance between the two realms, the two aspects. But yeah, no, I see what you're saying, and it seems like a lot of contemporary philosophy has some kind of suture to politics. Like there is some kind of political element in the body of work. So do you think you're more interested in Pills? This is for you. Do you think you're more interested in the kind of political outcome of, or the connotations behind the philosophy, or does it not really need that, or what do you think?
Well, yes, if we qualify the word politics to mean, the broadest possible meaning, just like sociality, what do we do with philosophy? But in speaking of problems, I mean, we're hurtling towards them, right? They're not being resolved, and I think if you want philosophy to continue, then if you want the species to continue, then the problems become much more front and center. And often philosophy doesn't have the answers to those things, but it also, in the way that Ian just described, it articulates the outline of what philosophy is for, whether it is, the queen of the sciences or whatever, whoever said that. But I think you can never separate philosophy from its problems, and that's the measuring stick on which I judge it.
All right. So I think we're probably at that point where we should probably say our goodbyes and thank you for. Unless Pills, you have any other questions?
I have one question for anyone who's out there. Have you watched the new Lord of the Rings, and does it suck really, really bad, or does it only suck a little bit? Because I'm scared to even touch it.
It's horrible.
Oh, shit. I knew it. Well, I guess I won't be doing that tonight then.
Watch Better Call Saul.
You're the second person in 2 days who's told me to do that.
It's great.
Yeah, I think our friend Lit Vic said to watch Better Call Saul.
True, and Lit Vic's taste in terms of narrative is quite good. So I would, and now I've had another person tell me, so maybe that's the next thing.
Pills, I look forward to when you get into literature more, and I hope you analyze Frankenstein, which I think is a great book that could add a lot to the topic of politics that you usually go into. But yeah, I look forward to that. Blood Meridian and all the rest of them.
I have to say, I suck at it. I'm gonna have to call in all the angels, because I'm, despite saying that literature is better, I can't read and interpret it properly for shit without reading someone else's paper on it.
This is so funny because I was talking to Elizabeth about the same thing, that when it comes to academia and when it comes to work, I'm a one-track pony. Like, I can only read philosophy, and I'm so used to reading it. I can't read a literature book. I wouldn't even know what to do with it. No clue. And Elizabeth was like, "What about Marx? He's such a great literary writer. And what about this and that?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I probably wouldn't be able to stomach half of it."
Honestly, for that reason you just mentioned, Christopher, I suck at reading Plato. I much prefer reading Aristotle, because Plato's narratives are just too much for me. It's like I prefer the dry prose. I can look at it better. Everything is clear.
You need to read Proclus or Plotinus if you like Plato. That's where it's at. But we're all over the place here. So
well, we're way too hard on Plato, and I know I was shitting on him earlier, but I even think that Heidegger's too too hard on Plato, because he's writing as if there's not just like myths sprinkled throughout. Like one guy dies and he goes to see the forms. Myth of Atlantis we read on our podcast like a couple weeks ago. There's just like randomly Socrates will be like, oh yeah, and then I heard this story, and then just drop it in the middle of a dialogue. And I think when we lump Plato and Aristotle together, we forget all that cool stuff is in there too.
Yeah, I agree, Pills. Plato is a literary genius. I think even English majors should read like The Republic, for example, or at least the Trial and Death of Socrates. I think he's a great writer.
So maybe Aristotle's the one we should just be picking on, because Plato doesn't even write in his own voice. He writes in Socrates' voice 97% of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, Elizabeth just did some videos on the Timaeus and the Republic, I believe. It's so funny. We have a friend. We have a friend named Sar, and he was telling me how he sees connections between Plato's Republic and the Bhagavad Gita. only one of our friends Sar could think like that, but I can also see the connection. Elizabeth, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. In the last chapter of Plato's Republic, there is a near-death experience. Someone dies, and for 12 days they watch what goes on in the afterlife. And I think things like that are interesting because no one really knows what happens after we die, and it's just interesting to see what the ancients thought about that, because it's pretty wild.
And maybe the reason we're in this mess is because they separated philosophy, or Aristotle separated philosophy from literature.
Actually, Pills, I wanted to speak exactly on that. One thing I do love about Plato is how philosophy and arts is unified. And this is why I love, especially from Heidegger, continental philosophy, is because philosophy becomes a kind of art. And me, myself, I suck at art, all its forms. When I found philosophy, I felt like the artist in me could finally express itself through these concepts. And that's why I hate analytic philosophy a lot. I think it's so dry. It's inauthentic to me.
Yeah, love to hear that.
Well, it's I'm gonna end the session. I want to thank everybody for coming, especially Pills, and for all of our speakers. It was a blast, and thank you so much, Pills, and thank you, Elizabeth, for always being a wonderful co-host with me and helping me with the show, our show. Sorry, and Pills, this was great. I'm glad we had you on. I had lots of people here, and of course, the recording will be on my Twitter, and we'll archive it and put it on our YouTube space, Philosophy in the Spotlight. Also, if you didn't know this, Pills also made our logo. So our beautiful green and black and white logo, Philosophy in the Spotlight, was made by Pills. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone. And thank you, Pills.
Thank you for having me. And now, since I can't go watch Lord of the Rings, I'll watch Liz's video on the Timaeus.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Make sure you comment and be a part of the conversation. I'll comment back.
All right, cool. All right, see ya.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.